Good morning. My name is Ed Bernard, and I began my term as chair of the Financial Accounting Foundation in January. I'm honored and humbled to lead this important organization and committed to engaging with our stakeholders across the board. Having spent most of my career in the financial sector, I know it's critical to ensure that everyone, investors, preparers, auditors, and the diverse users of financial statements, excuse me, all feel they have a voice in the process. I've begun to meet with some of you and look forward to the opportunity to hear from many more soon. I'd like to welcome our stakeholders tuning in to today's meeting. Today's meeting will include reports from the FASB Chair, the GASB Chair, the FAF Executive Director, and the FAF Treasurer. And we will receive reports about the activities of the Financial Accounting Standards Advisory Council and the Government Accounting Standards Advisory Council. We will also receive a report from the Trustees Standard Setting Process Oversight Committee. Before we get to those reports, I'd like to take a moment to say thank you publicly to Kathy Casey, who concluded her term as chair of the FAF Board of Trustees on December 31. Kathy served diligently as both a member and as a leader of this board. I thank her for that service and for her very supportive efforts to provide a smooth transition as I took on this role. As chair, Kathy led the organization during the unforeseen challenges of COVID, while helping to ensure a laser focus was kept on the needs of stakeholders during the global pandemic. Kathy also oversaw the creation of the strategic plan the FAF published last fall, and that will guide our efforts for the next several years. Kathy's passionate about the important role of trustees, the role they play in protecting the independence of standard setting, and effectively advocated for this organization with stakeholder groups, members of Congress, and regulators. She will be missed by the board. I'd also like to acknowledge the trustees of this board, the members of the Appointments Committee, the FAF Executive Director, John Auchincloss, for their careful and conscientious leadership through this transition. In conjunction with the staff, everyone has worked painstakingly to ensure a seamless process through my onboarding. I'm not only impressed by their commitment to the organization, but to the greater mission of the work of supporting the setting of high quality accounting standards. I look forward to working with all of these individuals and to playing a part in this larger mission. I'd also like to welcome Marion G., a new board member who, like me, is attending his first official FAF trustee meeting. Marion currently serves as the finance director for the Metropolitan St. Louis Sewer District. He manages the development of the district's annual capital and operating budgets and develops financial forecasts for the district. He also manages oversight of several internal departments. As a member of the executive team, he's responsible for preparing the district's strategic operating plan. Over his career, Marion has served in several positions for the Government Finance Officers Association of the United States and Canada, including past president and chair and vice chair of the Treasury and Investment Management Committee. In addition, he has served on several nonprofit boards. Please join me in welcoming Marion to his new role. I'd like to extend a special thanks to trustees David Lillard and Tim Ryan for their work leading the Standard Setting Process Oversight Committee, which will begin live streaming their meetings in May in order to increase the transparency of the committee's work. You'll hear more about this step in their report. And one additional item of note, yesterday the FAF launched its free enhanced online access to the Accounting Standards Codification and the Governmental Accounting Research System in an effort to make FASB and GASB financial accounting standards even more widely accessible to stakeholders and the public. The newly released free version will provide enhanced navigation and search capabilities, among other features. We're pleased to offer this new level of access and want to thank FASB, GASB, and FAF staff who implemented this change. With that, let's move to our regular agenda. The first item of business is to approve the minutes from the board's November 15th meeting. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. We'll now move to the reports from the FASB, FASAC, GASB, and GASAC. First, FASB Chair Rich Jones.
Great. Thanks, Ed, and welcome. 2022 ended and 2023, which is, by the way, our 50th anniversary, has begun with a great deal of standard setting activity. We continue to see the benefits from having invested the time and effort in doing the right outreach, setting the right agenda, and now we're executing on that. Some of our recent progress includes we've issued final standards on reference rate reform and an insurance transition issue. We've issued EDs on segment disclosures, accounting by joint venture for formation, common control leasing, and 2 chapters of our conceptual framework. The chapters relate to reporting entity and recognition and derecognition. We completed deliberations, so we'll be issuing final standards shortly related to an EITF consensus on accounting for investment tax credits and common control leasing. And we expect to issue EDs on accounting for and disclosure of crypto assets and improvements to income tax disclosures before the end of the quarter. In addition to our standard setting activities, our post-implementation reviews of the revenue recognition, leases, and credit losses standards continue to help us fine-tune GAAP guidance in these areas. We've issued numerous standards as a result of what we have learned through the PIR process, and we continue to monitor those standards as a means of identifying areas for improvement. We also recently welcomed leading accounting academics to our offices here in Norwalk for our annual financial reporting issues conference. I will say it was great to see everyone back in person. It was an excellent sharing of information and ideas. Continuing on the academic front, under the leadership of our board member, Christine Bodison, we recently announced a new program with the Chokasian Accounting Research Center of the University of Chicago Booth School of Business, intended to encourage and support academic research relevant to financial reporting issues. In short, 2023 is shaping up to be a busy and productive year here at the FASB, one that would not be possible without the engagement and support of all our stakeholders. I want to thank them for always taking the time to participate in our process. Without them, the past 50 years would not have been possible. Ed, that concludes my report. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Rich? Tim?
Thanks, Ed, and thanks, Rich. Rich, you mentioned crypto briefly in your remarks, and it certainly has been a hot topic of conversation. And I know we've been working on a digital asset project, if you would call it that. I wonder if you could just expand on your thinking and what's happening.
Sure. Thanks, Tim. So we do expect to issue an exposure draft by the end of this quarter. And our project's really focused on what we heard during our outreach was the greatest need, which was that certain companies that aren't applying specialized industry accounting were faced with a model where they were continuously marking their assets down to lowest price. But it wasn't really reflecting the volatility of those assets. In other words, it wasn't fair value. It wasn't recognizing appreciation as well as depreciation. That's a project that we added, and we've made pretty quick progress on that project. And obviously, we're looking forward to hearing from our constituents on it.
Other questions for Rich? Mary?
So Rich, you talked about the academics, and one of the things that's buzzing around academia right now is AI that's getting a lot of press, is things like Chat GPT. Mm-hmm. And it made me wonder the extent to which the FASB thinks about how investors ingest financial reporting information these days with the use of technology. And if so, what are you doing about it? What are you thinking about it?
Sure. Great question, Mary. And no, we're not going to use it to write our standards yet. So I would just note that. But I think it is important, and that's part of our continuous outreach with investors, is understanding their ability to process data, how they're processing data, how do they get the most important data for making their investment capital allocation decisions. So I'd say it's part of an ongoing process. Obviously, we work with the SEC on certain XBRL tagging of information that is widely used in processing information, but it's something that we're looking toward the future. In other words, what's next and how are investors processing that data? But I think that's a key part of our investor outreach, which is really understanding which data is the most important, how is it processed, and when does it actually influence those capital allocation decisions. Thank you.
Other questions for Rich? Tim?
Rich, one of the things that we've talked about in Oversight Committee is the agenda prioritization, but also timeliness of standards. Maybe just share how you're thinking about timeliness, but due process and balancing both of those.
And Tim, a great question. And there's no doubt that we've gotten a lot of questions on timeliness. But the one thing that we don't do, and we're never asked to do, which is shortcut our due process. We have a due process to make sure all of our stakeholders can weigh in, that we can learn from their perspectives, and that we can craft the best, and I'll call them sustainable standards through that process. It doesn't mean, though, that we can't explore some different things about how do we collectively as a board decide to scope a project. Can we envision the end or some form of end when we're adding it to our agenda? And also making sure that we're working on the information and the accounting that's of the highest priority to investors, and not getting distracted by other things. So I think that there are things that our board has been doing, and I think that we can continue to do that will help with speed, but one would not be to shortcut due process.
Any other questions before we move to Michael Morrow's report? Great. So FASAC Chair Michael Morrow.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My report can be found in tab 12 or page 83 in your materials. That report includes activities through the end of December, but I'll also highlight some recent and upcoming events. Starting with the December FASAC meeting, which I'm pleased to say was our first in-person meeting in some time. And just as an aside, I think all the benefits that you think would accrue to being in person in terms of informal networking, sidebar conversations, we certainly realize those and look forward to continuing to meet in person, and probably some degree of a hybrid basis as well. But the first topic we discussed was segment reporting. During that session, FASAC members discussed the proposed accounting standards update on segment reporting and potential improvements to reportable segment disclosures. Overall, the council members who were investors commented upon the importance of public entities reporting high quality information at both the segment and the consolidated level, noting that diversity in practice with current segment level disclosures, and supported many aspects of the proposed improvements to current segment disclosures for public entities. Some council members commented that evaluating whether a segment expense is significant involves judgment, and suggested the board clarify how the significance threshold should be applied, noting that the significance of a segment expense may vary from period to period. They also noted that the proposed guidance would be particularly relevant for companies that currently disclose their business activities as a single reportable segment. The second topic was on accounting for government grants. During that session, the council members discussed the research project and whether certain recognition, measurement, and presentation requirements in IAS 20, accounting for government grants and disclosures of government assistance, should be incorporated into GAAP for business entities. Overall, council members indicated support for the development of one accounting model to account for government grants to reduce the diversity in practice and increase consistency among companies. And they noted that the scope of a potential project could be challenging, expressed mixed views about whether IAS 20 or current principles within GAAP, such as the accounting for contributions in subtopic 958-605, should be leveraged as a starting point. The third topic was on select FASB projects. This was a very helpful session where the staff went through a fairly long list of all the current projects underway and gave us a slightly deeper dive than we might otherwise get. The improvements to income tax disclosure and disaggregation income statement expenses received the most discussion. On Thursday, February 23rd, we held our orientation for newly appointed FASAC members. That was very well attended, and look forward to those members joining us. On Monday, March 6th, we'll have our annual administrative session for all members, which includes a self-review of our operations and effectiveness. And then the next day, on Tuesday, March 7th, we anticipate that the topics that we will be covering are definition of a derivative to educate council members on the project and discuss certain aspects of that project. And then we're going to discuss changing business practices and emerging accounting issues to seek input about future trends, emerging issues, business practices, business models, and whether there are emerging areas that the FASB should consider addressing. And then the final topic will be the FASB interpretive process and the role of the EITF. And we'll additionally get an update on current FASB projects. Also, I just note in January, I met individually with each board member and the FASB technical director to discuss FASAC operations and potential meeting topics. An outlook of potential topics for 2023 is in the appendix area of your materials, page 231. We welcome your input on these and any other topics that you think FASAC should consider in the future, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Mike? Seeing none, I'll turn it over to the GASB.
Thanks, Ed, and good morning, everybody. Always great to be with you and appreciate the opportunity to update you on the GASB activities. During the fourth quarter of 2022, we did move all of our projects forward. We were able to issue an exposure draft of an implementation guide update that added some Q&As to help our stakeholders implement the GASB 87, the new lease standard, and GASB 96, the subscription-based IT arrangement standard. On the GASB 87 implementation, that was effective and is effective for fiscal year 2022. So the fourth quarter was kind of the busy season, I think, of our technical inquiries, where they had been going for a while in 2022, but certainly ramped up a bit in the fourth quarter. But we do believe, based on that and based on kind of other communications, that the standard, the lease standard, is being implemented effectively by governments as the standard would require. We did hear from a few stakeholders that the implementation of that standard was maybe a little bit more challenging than they anticipated it being. And we have taken that feedback and given it to and put it into our ongoing post-implementation review process that was already underway on the lease standard. I think part of the challenge is that governments continue to be faced with resource challenges, personnel challenges. It's a challenging environment for them to hire and retain their staff, and we continue to hear that and take that into account. Having said that, we were very excited in the fourth quarter to announce that we were able to hire a senior research manager, which was an open senior management position in our organization. And we're very excited to announce that Tammy Waymeyer is joining us here in January or February. So we're excited to have her on. I think the biggest topic, though, of conversation among our stakeholders as I go and talk to them in the fourth quarter and certainly into this first quarter is the passage in December of the federal government's Financial Data Transparency Act, which in a nutshell, gives the SEC the kind of requirement to implement a data standard for the municipal securities environment and any reports filed with the MSRB. That act continues to be something that during the fourth quarter and into the first quarter, we have been engaging with the federal regulators, including the SEC, about our interest in participating in that implementation and creation of a data standard, at least, and in particular as it relates to financial reports filed by governments with the MSRB. So that will conclude my report. But happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Joel? Manju?
Thank you, Joel. You made reference to the passage of the Federal Data Transparency Act. And as you know, that Act could pose challenges for GASB as electronic reporting that might result from the Act. I know it's early in the process, but can you share with us what are your thoughts on how GASB would be approaching these challenges that might be coming your way?
Thanks, Manju. Yeah, I think that whether the Act occurred or not, it has been something that we are devoting more time to monitoring evolution in electronic financial reporting. How is technology changing? How investors and other users of government financial information are consuming that information, as Rich talked about a little bit in his report. So that has been of interest to us. I think this act really kind of speeds that up. And our interest really then is about, if we're achieving our mission, making sure that users are getting the right information, which is what we're doing every day, then it's important that we be involved in whatever that process is of determining what is the right information. That's the development of a taxonomy. That's something that the SEC possibly, seemingly is going to be doing as it relates to the implementation of the Act. So we are certainly engaging with them, letting them know that we think we're well positioned to help with, for the annual financial reports, such an endeavor of creating a data standard, and that we're ready to play a constructive role in that. So we continue to reach out to them and engage with them and encourage them to engage with us.
Other questions? David?
Thank you.
Chairman, many people in the governmental sector, leaders in accounting, are concerned about the lack of resources or decreasing amount of resources for accounting. And in that regard, can you speak for a little bit about the GASB's point of view on that, and also, how you look at that from the standpoint of cost benefit analysis when issuing standards, et cetera?
Thanks, David. It is something we continue to hear, and I think it is challenging. And the board, when it is in the process of our projects, is taking into account that as part of that cost, it's not just that there is a cost, but that those resources that are the cost when a government implements it are strained. And so for us to continue on with our projects, for the results of our projects, and even to add a new project, we really got to have an expectation or ultimately a benefit that is a significant, meaningful impact and improvement to the information that comes from the financial reports, for us to then put that burden, require that cost of all of our stakeholders, but in particular the preparers. So we're very in tune with that and considering that both in adding projects and as we progress on our existing projects.
Any other questions for Joel? Great, then we'll turn it over to GASAC Chair Beth Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The GASAC held its last meeting of the calendar year in October 10th and 11th. And that meeting was outlined in my previous report to the FAF, which was on November 15th. So I won't go through that again, that meeting, but what we've done since then is really start a focus on through the fourth quarter and continued into January on onboarding new members. GASB staff and I have reached out to all the new members. I've also had a conversation with a number of long-serving members and asked them to be mentors to the new members, and we've got that process in place. And we think this will be extremely helpful as the new members begin reviewing their materials for the April 3rd and 4th meetings. The two groups of new members met with the staff, the GASB staff and myself in an introductory session to give them an opportunity to ask questions and to explain the process that we have, the annual overview of GASAC's discussion of technical agenda priorities. And wanted to give them a heads up on that, which is going to be part of our April meeting. And it's really an opportunity for folks to say, what do they believe should be on that technical agenda and help, excuse me, prioritize that. We will have a full orientation meeting with the new members on April 3rd in the morning, just prior to the beginning of the full GASAC meeting. The executive committee scheduled to meet on the 31st. And in continuing the trend that we've had, we're working to focus on ways to enhance communication with our stakeholders, have those discussions on getting to the issues that David Lillard just mentioned in terms of resources and working with them and how we can be helpful. And I think that we've paired very well with the GASB staff as they're looking at new ways to get information out in video or other media, so that folks are able to digest that material and be able to do that in such a way that recognizes that they do have, in fact, scarce resources. So the executive committee, as I said, will meet on the 31st. The meeting for the full group will be on the 3rd and the 4th. And that completes my report, and I'd be pleased to answer any questions.
Thank you, Beth. Any questions for Beth? Seeing none, our next item is a report from the chairs of our co-chairs of the Oversight Committee, David Lillard and Tim Ryan. I'm not sure which. David, looks like you'll kick it off.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The standard setting process Oversight Committee met by Zoom on Friday, February 24 for approximately 3 hours and had a fulsome meeting on various issues. I'll begin with the GASB portion of that. GASB Chair Joel Black and Director of Research and Technical Activities Alan Skelton discussed the GASB's good progress on all agenda projects in the last quarter, including the issuance of an exposure draft implementation guide update and its continued deliberations and progress on 2 comprehensive projects, the financial reporting model and revenue and expense recognition. Some of these matters have already been covered in GASB Chair Black's report during this session today. In particular, GASB Chair Black highlighted for the committee the GASB's continued focus and monitoring of electronic financial reporting, including the impact of the Financial Data Transparency Act and the role of the GASB should be prepared to play in the future with regard to these requirements on a going forward basis. The committee remains focused on this topic and continues to serve as a sounding board for the GASB whenever needed in this regard. With this, I'll conclude my portion and turn the matter over to Tim Ryan, the co-chair, who will cover the rest of the report.
Thank you, Co-Chair Lillet. Appreciate that. Good afternoon, good morning, everybody. Thank you for the time. At the meeting that David referred to, we also spent time with Chair Rich Jones and Technical Director Hilary Salo going through a number of topics. And the topics we covered are very similar to what Rich had just covered in his session. We talked about updates on the technical agenda. We covered PIR activities in progress and also PCC matters. For those listening, the committee's questions often focus on, are we getting the right amount of input from all stakeholders? Do the right amount of resources exist to the FASB board and their staff to get the projects done following the due process that Rich referred to earlier? We talk about culture of collaboration among the board members to make sure that all points of view are being considered, and we're satisfied that that is happening in our dialogue. We also went deep on two topics in the meeting. The first one is we got an update just on feedback the FASB is hearing from different stakeholders across the broad spectrum of stakeholders that we had, and we got an update on that, and that was very helpful. One of the new things that we did as part of our continuous improvement is Rich and team took us through a deep dive on the income tax process of how stakeholder feedback is considered and the wide range of feedback that comes in. We called it a case study, and it was very helpful for the committee and very welcome in terms of just understanding on what I will loosely say, using quotes, a live patient of how the FASB board is getting input throughout the process. And the committee felt very satisfied, and it was very informative for us to understand how it actually works on a project that is of very high importance to the FASB and to the FAF and to the committee. Lastly, the thing that I want to cover is what Ed had covered in his opening comments. We've shared in this session before, we continue to look for ways to continuously improve. We continue to look for ways to increase transparency. And the committee is very proud to let you know that we're excited on May 9th. We will live stream portions of our Oversight Committee meeting for anybody who's interested in attending. What we will do is the details for that will come out and be posted to the FAF website 1 week in advance, and we welcome any questions that you have on that as well. We continue to focus on transparency and improvement, and we're looking forward to that meeting. And with that, I will turn it over to you, John, for the next session.
Thank you. Our chairman, Ed Bernard, mentioned at the outset of the meeting that we are now offering an enhanced free version of our codification materials. And I just wanted to say a couple additional words about that. So the current free view, which our subscribers have known as basic view, is now going to include nearly all of the features and enhancements of the previously paid professional view. So as a result, we are eliminating a professional view, and all subscribers to the professional view should be assured that they will receive full pro rata refunds of previously paid amounts. So obviously we're going to stop accepting new subscriptions to professional view. And in fact, we're going to eliminate the terms basic view and professional view from our branding terminology. I will observe that this project marks a significant positive step in our continued effort to make financial accounting standards more accessible to our stakeholders. And I'd like to join Ed in offering our thanks to the FASB, GASB staff, and in addition to my staff on the FAF who successfully executed this change. You just heard from Trustee Ryan about the new initiative to live stream portions of our Oversight Committee meetings going forward. And I'd just like to note that I believe this change is going to strengthen our commitment to transparency, and it's going to shine a light on the committee's oversight responsibilities in action for our stakeholders. So once again, I'm thanking people today. I'd like to personally thank the members of the Oversight Committee for their leadership in helping to implement this important effort. Well, finally, I'd just like to say a few words about our 2023 budget. As was reported in our November Board of Trustees meeting, the trustees approved our budget at that time, and then we submitted our plan to the SEC for final review. In mid-December, we held a call with SEC staff to facilitate the process, answer all their questions, and I'm pleased to report that on February 8th of this year, the Commission issued an order confirming that the accounting support fees contained in our 2023 budget were consistent with Section 109 of the Sarbanes-Oxley Act. So in line with our usual process, management has started to work with both the PCAOB and FINRA to begin the assessment and billings for our 2023 FASB and GASB accounting support fees. We will shortly be posting the details of this budget and the FASB's and GASB's accounting support fees on the FAF website. I'd like to remind listeners that the FAF voluntarily contributes substantial portions of our revenues from publications to offset our accounting support fees. Once again, the details will be available on our website shortly. So with that, I would like to conclude my report, but I'd be happy to take any questions.
Any questions for John? Okay, seeing none. Lastly, we'll have a report from our treasurer, David Lillard, on our financials.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The FAF's financial results for the year ending December 31, 2022 are located on master page 99 in your materials. The financial condition of the FAF remains strong. Net assets increased $10.7 million overall for the year. This represents an $8.6 million favorable variance attributed to the following offsetting variances. First, to publishing revenues of $2.4 million, which were favorable against the budget, primarily due to an increase in licensee revenue. Secondly, to operating expenses being $6.8 million less than budget, primarily due to several factors. Publishing expenses were lower due to deferred depreciation expense related to the CVE initiative and salary and benefits for several vacant positions across the organization, and lower travel and meeting costs related to COVID-19. Third, offsetting this was a $1.8 million unfavorable variance in investment return due to market conditions. The FAF's balance sheet remains strong as total assets increased by $35 million. Fixed assets, operating lease right of use asset, and operating lease liability all increased related to our headquarters relocation project, which has been concluded. Overall head count for the organization was 9 positions below budget, reflecting several FAF, FASB, and GASB vacant positions. Mr. Chairman and members, that's my report.
Thank you very much. Any questions there? Okay, this will end the public session of today's FAF Board of Trustees meeting. I'd like to thank you again to those of you who tuned into the webcast for this meeting. As we close, let me remind you that the FAF Board of Trustees will be meeting in Washington, D.C. on Wednesday, May 10th, 2023. Thanks very much for joining us and have a good day.